You guys, I need to know, was I wrong for what I did? Seriously, tell me if you would have done the same thing, because some days I feel like a monster, and other days I feel completely justified. My own sister, my blood, used my credit card to pay for her entire wedding, and when I confronted her, she just laughed and said, "You'll never marry anyway, so what does it matter?" And then, to top it all off, my mom, the woman who raised me, called it a gift. A gift, can you believe the audacity? But I got my revenge. Oh, I got it good. I waited. I waited until the reception, the absolute peak of her supposed perfect day, and then I froze the card. The lights went out, the music stopped, and the manager walked right up to her, microphone in hand, and asked her to pay up. I still replay that moment in my head, over and over, sometimes with a sick satisfaction, sometimes with a creeping dread. Was it too much? Did I go too far? You tell me. Let me take you back to the beginning, before the chaos, before the wedding, before my family imploded. My sister, Clara, and I have always had a complicated relationship. She's 3 years older than me, and ever since we were kids, she's been the golden child. The prettier one, the smarter one, the more popular one. Or at least, that's how our parents always made it seem. I was always just me, the quieter one, the bookish one, the one who preferred her own company. We never really fought as children, more like I just existed in her orbit, often overshadowed. As we grew up, the differences between us became more pronounced. Clara was always chasing the next big thing, the next trend, the next boyfriend. She dated a lot, always had a steady stream of admirers, and she loved being the center of attention. I, on the other hand, was focused on my career. I studied hard, went to a good university, and landed a fantastic job right out of college. I worked my tail off, saved diligently, and built a comfortable life for myself. I bought my own apartment, something I was incredibly proud of, and I finally felt like I was creating something for myself, something independent of Clara's looming presence. Our parents, particularly my mom, always seemed to push Clara more towards marriage and having a family, while I was just expected to keep working. It always felt like they valued Clara's potential as a wife and mother more than my actual achievements. It stung, but I tried to ignore it. I truly did. Clara met Mark, her fiancé, about 2 years ago. He seemed nice enough, a bit bland for my taste, but he adored Clara, and that's what mattered, right? He came from a well-off family, which I knew was a huge plus in my sister's book. Soon enough, they were engaged. And that's when the wedding planning began, and with it, the descent into madness. Clara, being Clara, wanted the biggest, most extravagant wedding imaginable. She talked about it constantly, showing off Pinterest boards filled with designer dresses, exotic flowers, and ridiculously expensive venues. My parents, of course, were thrilled. My mom was practically planning it with her, oohing and aahing over every costly detail. I tried to be supportive, I really did. I attended dress fittings, listened to endless debates about cake flavors, and even helped address invitations. But as the costs started to spiral, I began to feel a familiar unease. I knew Clara didn't have a huge amount of savings, and Mark, while comfortable, wasn't exactly a millionaire. I wondered how they were going to afford it all. I asked Clara about it once, gently, just mentioning that weddings could get really expensive. She just waved her hand dismissively and said, "Oh, don't worry about it, I've got it covered." I let it go, assuming she had some secret fund, or that Mark's parents were contributing more than I knew. Boy, was I wrong. A few months before the wedding, I got a new credit card. It was one of those premium cards with a high limit and great rewards, specifically for travel, which I love. I rarely used it, preferring to pay for most things with my debit card and keep my credit utilization low. I kept it primarily for emergencies or large, planned purchases where I wanted the added protection. I remember telling my mom about it. just in passing, proud of my good credit score and financial discipline. She nodded, smiled, and then immediately started talking about Clara's latest wedding drama, completely shifting the focus as usual. I didn't think anything of it at the time. My card was safely tucked away in my purse, or so I thought. Then the statements started coming in, not to my regular email, but to an old, seldom checked account I used for spam. I almost missed them. When I finally logged in, out of curiosity, my jaw dropped. Thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. Charges from a wedding planner, a high-end florist, a caterer, a luxury dress boutique, a videographer, a band, it was all there. Every single expense for Clara's dream wedding, all charged to my new credit card. My blood ran cold. My heart hammered against my ribs. I felt a wave of nausea. How could this have happened? I hadn't lost my card. I hadn't given it to anyone. I immediately called my bank, my voice trembling as I tried to explain what was happening. They put a temporary hold on the account, but the damage was already done. The charges were all approved, many of them several weeks old. They told me I needed to file a police report for fraud. But as they listed the merchants, it became horrifyingly clear. These weren't random fraudulent charges. These were specific, targeted purchases for Clara's wedding. There was only one explanation. Someone I knew had taken my card, and given the context, there was only one person it could be. Clara, or maybe my mom, enabling Clara. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach, a betrayal so deep it almost made me physically ill. I confronted my mom first, hoping, praying that there was some misunderstanding. I showed her the credit card statements, highlighting the wedding-related charges. She looked at them, her face paling slightly, but then she straightened up, a stubborn set to her jaw. "Oh, that," she said dismissively. "Clara needed some help. She'll pay you back eventually. Mom," I practically screamed, my voice cracking. "She used my card without permission. This is fraud. This is stealing." My mom just sighed, as if I was being unreasonable. "Don't be dramatic. It's family, we help each other, and besides," she said, her voice turning a little colder, "you have a good job. You can afford it. Clara needs this wedding." That's when the gift comment came out. "Consider it a gift," she said, as if she was bestowing some great honor upon me. "You're not married. You don't have kids. What else are you spending your money on?" My vision blurred with tears of anger and hurt. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own mother, defending my sister's blatant theft and trying to shame me for my financial stability. I stormed out of her house, my mind reeling. I knew I had to talk to Clara, but a part of me dreaded it, knowing how she would react. When I finally cornered her, she was in the middle of a frantic phone call with the caterer, discussing some obscure appetizer. I waited impatiently until she hung up, her face flushed with annoyance. "What do you want?" she snapped, clearly not in the mood. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm, but the tremor was undeniable. "Clara, we need to talk about my credit card." Her eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. She knew, she absolutely knew. "What about it?" she asked, feigning innocence, but her gaze darted away from mine. I held up the statements, shaking them slightly. These are all your wedding expenses. You used my credit card without my permission. You stole from me, Clara." She snatched the papers from my hand, her face hardening. She glanced at them, then tossed them onto a nearby table as if they were trash. "Oh, please," she scoffed, rolling her eyes. "It's not stealing. Mom said it was fine. You weren't using it anyway. That doesn't make it okay," I retorted, my voice rising. "You had no right. That's tens of thousands of dollars, Clara." She finally looked me in the eye, and what I saw there wasn't remorse, wasn't regret, but a smug sense of entitlement. "Look, you're not getting married anyway," she said, slowly, deliberately, as if she were speaking to a small child. What are you saving all that money for? A cat. Just consider it an investment in my happiness. Besides, Mark's family is very important. I need to make a good impression. This wedding is crucial. For my future, the words hit me like a physical blow. You'll never marry anyway. The casual cruelty, the complete disregard for my feelings, for my financial security, for my very personhood. It was a jab at my life choices, my singleness, my worth. My parents' constant subtle prodding about my marital status, now amplified and weaponized by my own sister. It was a vicious combination of entitlement and contempt. That's when something inside me snapped. The years of being overlooked, of being compared, of being treated as second, best, all came crashing down. The betrayal wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the utter disrespect, the callousness with which she dismissed my entire existence. I saw red, but I also saw an opportunity, a terrible, delicious, morally ambiguous opportunity. I didn't say another word to her. I just stared at her, a cold resolve forming in my heart. She looked a little unnerved by my silence, but quickly recovered her usual bravado. Well, if you're going to be like that, she sniffed, then you don't have to come to the wedding. Oh, I'll be there, Clara, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. You can count on it. And I walked away, leaving her in her self-absorbed bubble, completely oblivious to the storm I was brewing. The next few weeks were a blur of cold, calculated planning. I didn't tell anyone what I was going to do. I acted normally, sending a generic wedding gift, even offering a polite good luck, when I saw Clara. I pretended everything was fine, that I had accepted the gift. As my mom so dismissively put it, inside, though, a fire was burning. I spent hours researching credit card policies, fraud protection, and the legal ramifications. I knew what I was doing was drastic, potentially catastrophic for Clara, but the image of her smirking face, the sound of her dismissive words, fueled my determination. I wasn't going to just let her get away with it. This wasn't just about the money. This was about justice, about respect, about finally standing up for myself against years of being treated like a doormat. I meticulously checked the timing of payments, the contracts Clara had signed with the vendors, everything. I wanted to make sure my move would have maximum impact. I wasn't just going to cancel the card. I was going to wait for the perfect moment. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Here I was, financially stable, but robbed blind by my own sister, with my mother's blessing. They clearly thought they could walk all over me, that I was too meek, too much of a pushover to do anything about it. I had the power to make them pay, literally and figuratively, for their actions. But it meant potentially ruining my sister's wedding day, causing a massive public spectacle, and likely shattering what little family harmony we had left. It meant crossing a line, stepping into a realm of revenge that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have let it go? Would you have taken the high road? Or would you have unleashed hell? Tell me honestly, what would your reaction have been? The wedding day arrived, a beautiful, sunny Saturday, the kind of day Clara had always dreamed of. The ceremony was held outdoors at a picturesque vineyard. I sat through it all, a polite smile plastered on my face, watching Clara float down the aisle in her ridiculously expensive gown, purchased with my money. She looked radiant, oblivious, completely unaware that her carefully constructed perfect day was about to crumble. I exchanged pleasantries with relatives, accepted compliments on my dress, also bought with my own money, mind you, and acted the part of the supportive sister. But beneath the surface, my nerves were jangling, my heart pounding with a mixture of dread and anticipation. I kept checking my watch, waiting. The plan was locked in, the timing crucial. The reception was held in a grand ballroom at a luxury hotel. precisely the kind of opulent affair Clara had always envisioned. There was a live band, a lavish buffet, and an open bar. Guests were mingling, dancing, laughing. Clara and Mark were on the dance floor, doing their first dance, looking like the picture of marital bliss. My mom was beaming, reveling in the spectacle. I, however, was quietly making my way towards the main entrance, where I knew the hotel manager would be discreetly observing the event. I had already called the credit card company earlier that day, explaining the situation in vague but firm terms. I told them I needed to report unauthorized charges and freeze the card immediately. They asked if I wanted to do it right away, and I told them to hold off. I said I would call them back at a specific time, and that time was fast approaching. I watched Clara and Mark finish their dance, the applause echoing through the ballroom. Then came the speeches. Mark's best man delivered a funny, heartfelt toast. My dad, surprisingly, kept his speech brief and relatively normal. Then it was my mom's turn. She stood up, a microphone in hand, her eyes sparkling. She talked about Clara being her perfect little girl, about how she always knew Clara would have a fairy tale wedding, and then she made eye contact with me, and a slight, almost imperceptible smirk played on her lips as she raised her glass. And I want to thank everyone who contributed to making Clara's dream come true, she announced, her voice a little too loud, especially those who gave so generously, truly from the heart, to make this day possible. It was a direct jab, a thinly veiled reference to my gift. My blood boiled, that was it, the final straw. The confirmation that they truly believed they had gotten away with it, that I was just a pawn in their elaborate scheme. I pulled out my phone, my fingers shaking slightly, but my resolve absolute. I called the credit card company. "I'd like to freeze my card immediately," I said, my voice steady. "The account number is..." I rattled off the details, my eyes fixed on my sister, who was now laughing with Mark, completely oblivious. The representative confirmed the freeze. "It's done," she said. "The card is now inactive." I hung up, a strange mix of triumph and terror washing over me. The next few minutes were a blur. I discreetly approached the hotel manager, who was indeed near the entrance. I caught his eye, gave him a small, conspiratorial nod, and then melted back into the crowd, positioning myself near an exit just in case. I saw him talking into his earpiece, his expression serious. He walked over to a discreet service door, spoke to someone, and then returned, his gaze fixed on Clara. Suddenly, the music volume dipped, then sputtered, and then died completely. The band stopped playing mid-song, their instruments falling silent. A hush fell over the room as people looked around, confused. Then the lights. They didn't just dim, they flickered, then went completely dark for a second before coming back on, but at a much lower emergency setting. The entire ballroom was now bathed in a dim, eerie glow. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Clara and Mark, who had been chatting animatedly, looked bewildered. My mom's face was a mask of confusion. That's when the manager, a tall, imposing man in a crisp suit, walked directly to the stage. He took the microphone from the bewildered band leader. He cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice booming through the sudden silence. "I apologize for this interruption. It appears there has been a discrepancy with the payment for this evening's event." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. All eyes were on him, and then, slowly, his gaze drifted to Clara, who was now standing next to Mark, looking utterly mortified. "Mrs. Clara Miller," he said, using her new married name, his tone polite but firm. "It seems the payment for the entire reception has been declined. We require immediate payment to continue the event." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Murmurs erupted. Clara's face drained of all color. She looked like she was about to faint. Mark, beside her, looked utterly confused and embarrassed. "What?" Clara stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "That's impossible. It's on my sister's card. It should have gone through. The manager, however, remained impassive. I'm afraid the card has been declined, ma'am. It appears to have been frozen. We need immediate payment, or regrettably, we will have to cease all services. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop. All eyes turned to Clara, then to me. My mom, who had been sitting at a table near the stage, looked from Clara to me, her face a mixture of horror and dawning realization. Her jaw hung open. Clara started to panic. Mark, do you have your card? We have to pay. Mark, bless his clueless heart, fumbled for his wallet. I don't know if I have enough on my daily limit for this, he whispered back, clearly overwhelmed. The manager, ever professional, held the microphone out towards Clara. So, Mrs. Miller, will you be settling the bill? Clara looked around frantically, her eyes finally landing on me. There was a moment of pure, unadulterated hatred in her gaze. I simply met her eyes, a small, sad smile on my face. The smirk I had seen on my mom's face earlier now seemed to be mirrored on my own, but mine was laced with a painful victory. The aftermath was exactly as chaotic as I had anticipated. Clara, in a desperate attempt to salvage the situation, tried to call me over, her voice a desperate plea. But I just shook my head slightly, still holding her gaze. My mom rushed over to her, grabbing her arm. What did you do? She hissed at Clara. Then she looked at me, a silent accusation in her eyes. How could you? She mouthed. I just shrugged, a small, defiant gesture. The manager, seeing no resolution, simply stated, I'm sorry, but we cannot continue services without payment. And with that, the lights in the ballroom flickered off completely. The emergency lighting was all that remained. The band started packing up their instruments. The caterers began clearing the food. The open bar was shut down. The dream wedding had officially become a nightmare. Chaos erupted. Guests started leaving, confused and annoyed. Some were openly complaining. Mark's parents, who had been sitting at a prominent table, looked absolutely mortified. They approached Clara, their faces stern. I heard snippets of their hushed, angry conversation. How could you let this happen? This is an embarrassment. Clara was weeping openly now, her perfect white dress stained with tears and smeared makeup. My mom was trying to comfort her, but also glaring daggers at me from across the room. I felt a pang of something akin to pity, but it was quickly overshadowed by the immense sense of relief and vindication. They thought they could use me, abuse my trust, and then dismiss me with a cruel remark. They were wrong. I didn't stay much longer. I quietly slipped out of the reception, leaving the chaos behind. I knew I had burned a bridge, probably several bridges, with my family. My relationship with Clara was undoubtedly shattered beyond repair. My relationship with my mom would likely be strained, possibly forever. But as I walked out into the cool night air, a strange sense of peace settled over me. I had stood up for myself. I had demanded respect. I had shown them that I wouldn't be taken for granted. The phone calls started almost immediately after I got home. My mom, Clara, even some distant relatives, all furious, demanding an explanation, accusing me of ruining Clara's life. I ignored most of them. I picked up one call from my mom just to hear her rage. How could you be so cruel? She screamed. This was Clara's day. You ruined everything. I calmly explained again about the fraud, about the blatant theft, about their dismissive attitudes. She hung up on me, calling me heartless. Later, I received a text from Clara, filled with venom. She called me every name under the sun, threatened to sue me, and vowed never to speak to me again. I just blocked her number. Mark, to his credit, called me a few days later. He sounded devastated. He apologized profusely for Clara's actions, admitting he had no idea she had used my card. He also mentioned that his parents were absolutely furious and had threatened to pull their financial support for him and Clara if the matter wasn't resolved immediately. He said they were demanding that Clara repay every cent, or he would be out of a marriage and out of their good graces. I told him that I appreciated his apology, but that I wasn't unfreezing the card until the full amount was paid back with interest. He understood. It seems Clara had finally faced some real consequences for her actions. In the end, it took weeks of back and forth threats and a very uncomfortable family meeting with lawyers present. Clara, under immense pressure from Mark and his parents, eventually paid me back every single penny. The wedding, or what was left of it, had to be paid for out of their own pockets, which pretty much wiped out any savings they had. Mark's parents were clearly disgusted, and I heard through the grapevine that their relationship with Clara was incredibly tense. My relationship with Clara and my mom is effectively over. We haven't spoken since the lawyers got involved. Sometimes I miss the idea of having a sister, having a normal family, but then I remember the look on Clara's face when she said, "You'll never marry anyway." And I remember my mom calling the theft a gift, and the regret fades. I lost a family, but I gained my self-respect. So here I am, still single, still working hard, still financially independent, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Was it a harsh lesson? Absolutely. But sometimes people need a harsh lesson to understand boundaries and respect. I sometimes wonder if Clara ever truly understood the depth of her betrayal, or if she just saw it as a minor inconvenience in her grand plan. I may never know, but I do know that I stood my ground, and that felt like a victory worth fighting for. So that's my story. I know it's a lot, and it's messy, and it's complicated, but I needed to get it out there. Like this video if you were on my side. Subscribe for more stories like this, and please share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. I truly want to hear what you think. Was I justified, or did I go too far? Let me know. I'll see you all in the next story.